I'm going to start this off by saying something that a lot of people feel, but may not necessarily have the language for. Being an adult is not hard because of the big moments of responsibility. Obviously, those can be hard. I don't want to discount that. But where most of us struggle in our adult lives is the constant low level decisions that literally never stop. It's the emails, the appointments, the grocery lists, the things that you need to remember, the things that you meant to do and forgot about, and the things that quietly pile up in the background of your life that need to be managed on top of working a full-time job and having a social life and also staying sane. No one really teaches you how to manage that part of your adult life. And as I have really settled in all throughout my 20s and now I am 30, I have found over the last couple of years in particular, a pretty good rhythm to manage my life and all of these like life admin tasks in a way that actually feels manageable and supports me in general. And I think a lot of these things that we're going to talk about today will obviously help you too. We spend a lot of time on this show talking about productivity and discipline and motivation, but I really haven't spent any time talking about managing the life admin of it all, the systems that I stick to that really make my day-to-day life feel manageable instead of overwhelming, beyond just like my morning and night routine, which I feel like I have talked about ad nauseum at this point. What I've learned over the last couple of years, again, as I have really settled into my adulthood, I feel like those first few years post-grad, you're kind of like a newborn adult. But in my late 20s and now as I've moved into my 30s, I've learned that things get easier when you stop relying on willpower to get through everything and you start actually learning and relying on skills. Have you ever heard the saying from the book Atomic Habits, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems? This quote in particular applies here. And if you haven't read that book, it's called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I highly recommend you do so. So this episode, we're going to be talking about the skills and systems that will make your life as an adult easier. They're the skills that will reduce stress and save time and create a feeling of steadiness so you can show up better in the parts of your life that matter the most. I want to walk through 6 categories. I think I have 6. It's either 5 or 6 that in my experience change everything, even when you get just even a little bit better at them. You don't need to master all of these things at once. You just need to start seeing them as learnable skills instead of personality traits. So with that, let's get right into the episode. And before we do, I want to acknowledge a little bit of a change to the pod going forward starting today. I have some new cover art and I also have a new little intro. I'm trying to make the podcast a little bit less typical with the intro of it all. I feel like people skip those anyways. Like whenever I'm listening to a show, I skip the intro, even if I haven't listened to the show before. So we're mixing things up. I'd love to hear from you if you like it, if you don't, if you have feedback. And yeah, I hope you enjoy. But going forward, the podcast, we're going to be getting right into the point and sort of setting things up a little bit more actionable. Obviously, we'll still keep the chattiness of it all, like this, for example. And if I have updates or things to share, we're going to get into that, of course. But I do want to try to make these a little bit more actionable, not necessarily concise, because they're still going to be the same length, but a little more polished. I think that's the word that I'm going for. Anyways, now we'll get into the life admin of it all. So we're going to kick things off with scheduling, which I think is the foundational skill to managing your life as a functioning adult in general. This is the skill that holds everything together, and the way that people schedule is going to look a little bit different. But something that I've noticed is that when people say they're bad at time management, what they usually mean is that their life is unscheduled in a way that creates constant friction. Things live in their head instead of on a calendar or by a routine that they can repeat. This is something I noticed about myself that became a huge problem. It's why I got a notebook and I started getting really organized in Notion, and I have different areas where I jot things down when they come to my brain, because when tasks or ideas float around with no container in my head, this leads to some serious mental overload that can quite literally inhibit your ability to perform mundane tasks, but also inhibit your ability to show up as your best self in your day-to-day life, which is like what we all want to be doing. So scheduling is really not about being busy all the time or having a fancy color coordinated Google Calendar. I love the idea of an aesthetic Google Calendar. I hate that we now associate scheduling and being organized with only one way of doing so, because I have tried years and years and years. I bet you if you scroll back on my YouTube video, I have a very aspirational video about organizing my Google Calendar that I don't actually stick to. I have tried the Google Cal method time and time again, and it just doesn't work for me. And so I no longer force myself. I do use a Google Calendar, but I don't live by my calendar, and I operate just fine. Really, the goal is about giving things a place to live so that they stop taking up mental space, okay? The biggest shift for me was realizing that if something in my day actually matters, I need to find a way to schedule it either into my daily schedule or into my routine throughout the week. And I don't plan every single minute of my day on Google Calendar or every single day in every single minute of my week. But what I do use my Google Calendar for is to plug in a couple of key things. So I will plug in my workouts, like if I have a workout class or a tennis lesson or, somewhere related to fitness or activity that I need to be, I make sure that's plugged in a week in advance of like where I need to be and what time it's at. I also obviously will schedule into my Google Calendar important events that I need to show up to or that I can't forget, or calls and things like that. And then what I do is I'll plan my life and my schedule around those blocks that require me to be somewhere. So the system that I have found that really helps me map out my week strategically so I can kick things off feeling a little bit more organized and also know exactly what to expect day to day is like a 10-minute at the top of the week kind of vibe. So I spend 10 minutes on Sundays to plan out my workouts for the week and the high-level things that I need to remember to get done for work. I highly recommend mapping out your workouts at the top of the week if you are like a fitness person or somebody who is trying to work out more frequently, because not only does this help ensure that you get into classes if that's something that you are trying to schedule, but you can get a better idea of additional life things, like, for example, hair washing schedules or rest days and the like. If you know, especially I think like 98% of my audience on this podcast is girls, which yay, I have accomplished something fabulous with that. But like if I'm going to a hot Pilates class or a hot yoga class, that needs to align with the day that I'm planning to wash my hair, because otherwise I need to pick a different class for that day so that I don't mess up the schedule, because washing my hair, drying it, doing the whole thing, it takes time, okay? And that requires a little bit of friction in the schedule. As part of this process too, since I'm self-employed, and you can do this regardless of if you are self-employed or have a traditional job, but I have found that in this era of being self-employed, obviously it's a little bit easier for me to decide what I'm going to be doing in terms of work tasks on the daily. What I like to do is I will mock up daily themes. So what this does is it just helps me aggregate the tasks that I need to accomplish related to work for the week on similar or like days. So what I do is I will first map out like high level the most important things that I need to accomplish related to my work for the week. So sometimes this could be bulk filming. Like I'll have weeks where I film 3 or 4 YouTube videos, 3 or 4 podcasts, and I'll just get a bunch of filming out of the way so that I have a little bit more time in the following weeks to focus on short form content or a particular work project or something of the sort. Other times I could be doing brand partnerships. Like those tend to be all or nothing. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll have a month where I have really nothing coming through, and then I'll have the next month where I have 6 or 7 partnerships that are due in the same week or same 2-week period. So sometimes that's my focus for the week. Sometimes it could be like doing content ideation or administrative tasks. In January, I've been doing a lot of reset work and planning. So, what I'll do as part of this like Sunday planning out my week vibe is I will identify these top most important things that need to get done. Again, it could be just video filming for the week, or it could be a big focus on brand partnerships. Sometimes it's a combination of a few different things. Then I will map out each day with a theme of what I'm going to be focused on. So for example, when I do long form filming, I like to film a couple of videos in a day. And usually when I'm in the zone of long form, it's really hard for me to pivot into short form. So I'll focus one day or 2 days of the week doing bulk filming for long form. And then I'll spend maybe like a Wednesday or a Thursday doing content ideation and editing for short form. And then I'll spend one of those days filming for short form. And what this does is it helps me put all of my energy into one type of task instead of trying to switch to a bunch of different ones, which leads to feeling very overwhelmed and not actually accomplishing things. And then also, this exercise is so helpful for me going into the week so that I have an idea of what I'm doing and when. So if you are someone who freelances or is self-employed, I recommend doing a scheduling practice like this. But even if you're in a traditional job, or maybe you don't have as much control over your calendar, see if there are ways that you can, pocket different types of work all at the same time. So maybe you have Mondays and Wednesdays are days where you take the bulk of your meetings, and Tuesdays are days where you block off a big chunk of your calendar to do deep focused work, and Thursdays are days where you meet with your manager and you plan the week in advance. I don't know. Everybody's job is a little bit different. Or maybe Thursdays are your days where you go into the office. So that's a day where you have a lot of in-person meetings, and maybe you have lunches scheduled and things like that. So you're not going to be getting as much administrative work done. So see if there's a way for you to start building those blocks in. It may not be perfect day to day, but even if you can get focused blocks or focused chunks of different days, or adjust your calendar in a way where if people are going to be booking meetings, they know to book you during certain times, that can make a big difference in just the mental load of your work life so that it frees up a little bit more energy and brain space for you in your personal life. The other thing I want to highlight as part of this scheduling is that I do most of my planning in Notion. So I don't use Notion as like my work calendar or anything like that, but I do a lot of my business planning in terms of my daily to-dos and then my content calendar and things like that, all within one Notion hub. I do have a vlog where I showed my Notion and also my like 10 to 15 minute Sunday planning session. So I'll make sure if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be linked up on the screen. And if you are not watching on YouTube and you're listening in your ears, you totally should come join the fun on YouTube. But a few other additional practical scheduling skills, I think, that are going to make your adult life easier would be the weekly planning, even if it's only 10 minutes, time blocking your week loosely, not rigidly. Like, I don't think that it's productive to say that every day from 9 to 10, you're going to be doing the same thing, or from 10 to 12, you're going to be doing the same thing. Like, that's just not how a normal person's week functions, regardless of if you're self-employed. Trust me, I have tried. It just doesn't, at least for me, my brain just doesn't work that way. And then another thing that I like to do is schedule recurring tasks and reminders. For me, these are my workouts, as I've mentioned, remembering to take my medication. So I take an SSRI, which I've mentioned before, washing my sheets, grocery planning, which I like to do on Sundays. So stuff like that. It just helps me remember like the life admin. So I don't have to store it in my brain. I have it stored on my like weekly planning template. This is something that I've incorporated into my planner this year on my like weekly review or week in review layout. I have a section where I put in like personal admin stuff. So that's like grocery planning, washing my sheets, going through all of my chores, my digital declutter. That's another big goal of mine this year, is to like really keep my phone and my photos and my desktop and my downloads and all of that nice and clean so stuff doesn't pile up. So think about a way that you can do that. I also think too, maybe even just having like a to-do list notepad where throughout the week you write down things that come up, and then at the end of the week you check everything off and toss that out into the trash and then start fresh. So think think about those recurring tasks and the reminders that you need, things that come up all the time, and how you can sort of centralize them either in one place or on a notepad or in your work calendar or whatever, so that you don't forget. Scheduling is how you ultimately turn chaos in your brain into predictability, and predictability is calming. It reduces decision fatigue and it makes everything else feel significantly lighter. So if scheduling is something that you struggle with, I recommend starting with like a weekly plan or a weekly to-do or one centralized place, whatever works best for you. Like I have tried doing a written weekly planner, particularly related with work. It just doesn't really work for me because every day, like what I'm doing and how I do things shifts and changes. And I found I was always scribbling things out. So for me, a digital planner with Notion works the best. But for like daily to do and reminder and stuff, I also love to use a notebook. So find what system you're actually going to stick to. Moving on, we're going to get into maintenance. So this is doing small things before they become big ones. Regular maintenance, especially of your physical self, so like body, skincare, fitness, etc., as well as your home and your space, is one of the most underrated adult skills. And I feel like it's one of those things that constantly falls to the wayside for people. Most stress comes from deferred maintenance, whether it be, again, your physical maintenance, your digital maintenance, your emotional maintenance. Things usually don't fall apart all at once. They slowly degrade when they're ignored, and then it feels like everything is a disaster and you recognize it all at once it's all built up. Maintenance to me looks like resetting your space regularly instead of letting clutter build. So in my own life, this means that I never leave a mess for myself later. So when I'm done cooking, I'm putting the dishes away. I'm cleaning as I go. When I'm done doing my skincare and brushing my teeth in the bathroom, I'm putting everything back in the medicine cabinet, back in its spot, rather than it floating everywhere on the sink. When I wake up, I make my bed. These are all simple tasks that when you leave them for later, they lead not only to a messy house, but they can snowball and feel really overwhelming when you have to address them all at once. So like, for example, let's say you wake up every morning at 6:30 and you need to get ready for work, and then you head out the door. And as your process goes for getting ready for work, you get dressed, and in the process of getting dressed, you throw your clothes everywhere because you didn't pick out your outfit the night before. And then you go into the bathroom to brush your teeth and do your skincare, and you leave everything out on the sink. And then you go and make breakfast and you leave the dishes in the sink. And then you leave for work and you have a full work day, and then you go to your workout, and then you come home and it's 6:30 and your apartment is a disaster. And it's like, I can't just sit down and relax because now my apartment is a mess. And if you're so tired you don't clean it up, then you sit down and then it all starts to really pile up. I know somebody listening to this is either currently experiencing this or has experienced this. And this is why I just set a rule for myself that I don't leave the messes for later. That's part of regular maintenance. And it's a skill that you have to honestly develop and work on as you would anything else. It's putting everything in its place and holding yourself accountable to putting things back when you're doing it. And it actually is something that requires thought and intention, because even in times where I am not in a huge rush and maybe I'm picking out my outfit for an evening or for the day, I'll put something down on my bed or on my nightstand or whatever instead of hanging it back up. And then I'm like, why did I just do that? Because I'm feeling lazy. Oh, I'll just do it later. I catch myself now and I'm like, no, I can take the 10 seconds to take these jeans that I just took off the hanger and put them back on the hanger, and it will just maintain my space staying nice and clean. Like, even if you are watching this on YouTube and you were to look behind me at my sink, at my dishes, everything's put away. And that's not just because I'm sitting here filming. It's because this is just how my space is on a regular basis, because I don't leave the messes for later. I clean as I go. Another example would be just keeping up with basic home tasks so that they don't turn into overwhelming projects. So example, weekly laundry, doing your laundry on a consistent schedule every Sunday or every Monday or on the day that you work from home. Really important to get into a routine, so it's not like, oh my gosh, I have to spend my entire day one day doing 15 loads of laundry. It could be a weekly cleaning schedule or a daily vacuum schedule. I vacuum every single night. I clean my kitchen every single night. I don't go to bed until the dishwasher is running, the counter is wiped down, the floors are vacuumed, my bathroom floor is vacuumed, and everything is put away. Why? Because then I don't have to do a Sunday deep reset. Like, I see people who do Sunday resets every week, and I'm like, I'm kind of doing a mini version of that every single day because I don't want to spend my Sunday doing a 3-hour deep clean. Like, occasionally I will do a deep clean if I, feel like I need it, but I'm keeping my space clean consistently. So I don't need to be doing that on a weekly basis. And this just keeps my space constantly clean and constantly running and constantly functional for me. I think that's really the point I'm trying to get here is like when your space is a mess, everything that you're doing is a little bit harder. What happens? It creates friction. That's honestly unnecessary. And then we have the physical maintenance of it all. So this is where I really do rely on my morning and night routine. And it's also why having a morning and night routine are so important. I've mentioned in the past that these morning and night routines really are the things that anchor my day. And they do, again, create that mental space so that I'm not feeling so cluttered and overwhelmed going into my day and closing out my day. It also helps me get better sleep. So, for example, my morning skincare, my evening skin and body care, it just helps me maintain my personal presence so that I'm feeling my best and it's just part of my day now. And so I'm not constantly like, I need to do a detox or I need to do a glow up. Like, yes, there are things that I do on, a irregular basis to feel my best or maybe put a little bit of extra time and energy into my appearance. But on a daily basis, like I'm sticking to a pretty consistent maintenance routine and it just helps me, again, feel as good as I can every single day. A good rule of thumb, just in general, whether it applies to your physical maintenance of your body and self or the maintenance of your space, is that if something takes under 5 minutes, you should just do it. Replacing something or ordering a replacement online, sending a quick email, putting something away, scheduling an appointment, running the dishwasher, all of these are simple administrative things that are in relation to just general maintenance of your life and stuff that can be easily accomplished and checked off the mental list. It's not about perfection. The goal of maintenance is to prevent pileups of things because life feels significantly easier when there are less things that are out of place or broken or overdue or cluttered or unresolved. And again, this applies to your home, your systems, your physical self, and also your mental health, which I don't even have time to get into in this particular episode. Moving on into the personal admin of it all. This is the unsexy but essential stuff. It really is the category that most of us are avoiding until something goes wrong or requires immediate attention. So this would include things like personal emails, obviously your work email and everything is fine, but I get a lot of emails related to like health insurance claims and reminders for appointments and things like that. Documents, doctor's appointments, even talking through this, I'm reminded I need to make an eye appointment for this year. Different financial accounts, totally different conversation that I recommend you watch some of my personal finance videos because I talk about the accounts that you need. Forms, passwords, records, papers, mail. Oh my God, mail. How do we stop getting mail? I hate mail. I avoid checking my mailbox purely because I hate mail. Ignoring personal admin, though, doesn't make it disappear. Like when I go to my mailbox, there are still things in there that need to be addressed or looked at. What ends up happening is it just makes these things louder later. So one of the best adult skills that you can build is a simple system for managing this kind of stuff. And I'm not perfect with it. This is actually something that I am really working on. But it just needs to be like a consistent way of managing appointments, personal admin, all that kind of thing. So a few things that help. One being, and this one I really recommend, is one place for all of your important documents. So I actually have like a very simple filing accordion folder. It's not super big. And what I do is I will put all of my like physical documents, so the title to my car, my passport, if I get any tax information or W-2s or whatever, I have all of this organized by type. So, any important mail that I receive, as soon as I get it and open it up, it goes right into the filing folder that stays in a safe place in my apartment. So I'm never panicking for documents if I'm looking for something or if I need to reference something or if I'm looking for my passport or whatever. It's all in this one singular file folder. And I know where everything is and I know where I store that so that I can always go back and easily find it. And I don't have a big pile of paper or, I'm not rummaging around through junk drawers because I don't have junk drawers in my space. Like, it's just nice and organized. I also think having a place for important digital documents. So this could be a folder on your desktop or something. So anything that's important that you need to remember or any old documents that you need to just store for future use. I also think too, dedicating time each week for personal admin. This is something that I'm doing starting this year. I've been doing it the last couple of weeks, is having like a 10 to 20 minute period on my calendar on Friday mornings where I do my bookkeeping for my business, but I also check in to see if there are any, calls I need to make. Like this week, for example, I need to call my healthcare provider about a therapy bill that I got that's incorrect. I need to call because I was double charged for my eye insurance. Like, this is just dedicated time that I have on my calendar where it's like, okay, I'm going to do these administrative things that are annoying and feel really cumbersome, but I have it blocked. So I know it will get done instead of it being something that hangs over me all throughout the work week. So when you know what tasks you need to do, where things live, where your paper lives, where your mail lives, where things live on your computer, you will feel calmer. If you are interested in a whole like digital declutter of it all, let me know. There's also a Substack article about getting organized. I think it's by Anna Newton. Let me see. I'm looking this up right now live. Anna Newton. Okay, yeah. It's called How to Be Organized in 2026. And I will link this in the description of this episode because I think that this particular article on Spotify is like so fantastic and it's a really great read if you are someone who wants to get just organized in general. But I also have been going through a digital declutter, so I think that actually warrants its own episode. If you're interested, let me know. I'll probably do it anyways. Moving on. Okay, we're getting out of the like admin maintenance of it all and into some skills. These are two, in my opinion, of the most important skills you can learn as an adult. Number one being cooking basics and feeding yourself without stress. Knowing how to feed yourself consistently is one of, if not the most important adult skill there is. I don't know why it's something that we only put on women or that we don't take seriously because you have to eat every day. And if you're not eating or you don't know how to cook basic meals, like, that's a problem. I'm going to say it. That's an issue. Personally, I love to cook. So this doesn't like really overwhelm me all that much because it's something that I enjoy. But just because I like to cook doesn't mean that I want to be cooking big, huge, dramatic meals every single day of my life. Okay. I'm busy. I work for myself, yes, but I work 40 plus hours a week. Like, I'm not sitting around twiddling my thumbs. I wish I was. I'm really trying to become one of those influencers who doesn't work all day long, but I'm just not quite there yet. So unfortunately, that's not what my life looks like. And because of that, I'm tired and I don't want to be cooking heavy meals or big involved meals on the daily. Sometimes I'm just busy and I'm hungry and I don't feel like it. But there are a few things that I do on a weekly basis to set myself up for success. So first being that I have a few reliable like go-to meals that I can make where I pretty much always have the ingredients on hand for. So an example would be like an Asian tofu bowl. So this requires a little bit of tofu. I always have tofu in my fridge. I also have salmon in my freezer. So if I'm ever out of tofu, I can always just defrost a piece of salmon and have that instead of the tofu. Then, this needs some rice. It needs a vegetable. It's very easy, requires minimal brain power, and it's something that I know that I like. Another example would be like a tofu scramble. Again, I always have that in my fridge. It could be a quick pasta or a green bowl. I do have a few recipes that I can default back to if I'm not in the mood to cook and just need to get something made quickly. So I would recommend you think through what are a few go-to meals that you already know you enjoy that don't require a lot of ingredients or thought that you can cook up really quickly? Another thing that I do to make sure I'm constantly fed is always making sure that my fridge and pantry are stocked with things that I can actually cook, and I do that by grocery shopping very efficiently. I do have a full video, a few videos actually, about my grocery shopping, but taking some time on the upfront to plan your groceries is like absolutely, absolutely essential. And it really helps you map out what you're going to be cooking and when. If you are someone who struggles with this, I do recommend you get the cookbook called Don't Think About Dinner. If you can see, it's back here right by my stove. I'm actually like obsessed with this cookbook. It's so detailed and thorough, and it has so many great tips on how to use and reuse ingredients so that you're not wasting any food. But I definitely think that has tons of easy recipes and tons of stuff in there to help you plan and map out your meals so that you can shop more efficiently, plan more efficiently, and not literally have to think about dinner. There's also other recipes in there that aren't just dinner. And my next tip here is to do some simple prep on the upfront. So this could be chopping your vegetables up when you get back from the grocery store and putting them in a Ziploc bag or a big container so that when you're cooking dinner, you don't have to take out the cutting board and knife and chop every single night. It could be making a meal that you can freeze some portions of so that you have meals ready throughout the week. So for example, I usually like to make a big pot of beans at the top of the week. I use my Instapot. I always have a bag of beans in my pantry. And I always have a couple of little like sauces or spices or whatever that I can use to jazz them up. And I'll literally make the bag of beans. I will freeze 1 or 2 Ziploc size portions of them. And then I'll eat the rest for various meals throughout the week. And then in the future, a week or 2 later, if I'm busy or I'm in a pinch, I literally did this last night. I will take a bag of beans out of the freezer, defrost them, cook up some rice, cook up a veg, and then I have a really delicious, really easy, really quick meal. So very, very important to think about, like, are there easy meals or grains or proteins or whatever that you can pre-cook and also freeze? Chili is another one that's really easy to cook and freeze. Any type of soup, having a couple of those portioned out in the freezer is so helpful. When you can't feed yourself easily, everything becomes harder because when you're hungry, everything sucks. Like, if you know, your energy drops, your patience drops, your decision making is poor, and then you end up ordering out even if you have a fridge full of food to cook. Cooking basics are about repeatability. Even if you don't love to cook, as a functioning adult, you need to learn how to do a few simple meals. A small rotation of meals, it's all that necessary. Ingredients you always keep on hand. You need to know a couple of things. For you, it could be chicken, rice, a couple potatoes, and a different veg. Or it could be oatmeal and rice and some potatoes and some different types of fruit, or pre-packed smoothie kits or whatever. I don't know what you like. Think about what meals you actually enjoy and make sure you have a few on rotation that you feel really confident in so that you can reduce the daily decision of like, what am I eating today? You don't need to have variety every single day. You just need to be able to nourish yourself without friction. Obviously, you want to be able to change up what you're eating week over week, but I do find even in times where I'm feeling super creative in the kitchen, I always default back to the same couple of meals that are easy for me to do. Last but not least here, we're going to talk about self-regulation, which is, in my opinion, the skill that really ties everything together. Self-regulation is the skill that determines how everything in your life actually feels. This is something that I'm actively working on because it's a skill that requires constant practice, just like anything else. I talked about this in a previous episode, how I'm working on regulating my nervous system, and obviously like self-regulation is a life skill that helps you navigate difficult times, great times, just all different times in your life. So this looks like knowing when you're overstimulated and being able to identify that on your own, not having to be told like you're being a bitch and it's because you're overstimulated. Like, you need to be able to know, I'm having a hard time right now, or I'm feeling very mentally overwhelmed, so I'm going to take a step back. It could be knowing when you need to take a break so that you can do so before a burnout hits, or building small moments of silence throughout your day. This is another thing I'm doing because I've recognized that every moment of silence in my day, I had been trying to fill with noise, whether that be scrolling on TikTok or a podcast or music, and that was leading to me becoming very mentally overwhelmed and dysregulating how I operate. So I have decided, like, okay, throughout the day, I need some moments of peace and silence. And like, I am going to make sure I hold myself accountable to that. It could look like managing your emotions without spiraling. This is something that I have learned how to do through therapy, but I also learned that because I was overstimulated so often, it made me more irritable in general and less able to control my emotions. So I've mitigated this again by reducing my screen time and background stimulation dramatically. I've gone on an SSRI. I go to therapy regularly. I have activities and things that I do to help bring the mental temperature down when I'm feeling overwhelmed. So that's like going on a walk, doing my needle pointing or a hobby, reading a few pages of a book. Like I have identified that toolkit, and that is something that you have to do to learn how to self-regulate. Another thing here too is regulating your nervous system through routines. I am the ultimate creature of habit. I need to have a routine or else I feel totally and completely out of whack. I think a lot of adult stress is not about circumstance. Some of it is, okay, so I don't want to discount that, but a lot of it is about just being dysregulated while you're handling normal responsibilities. So, to really tie all of this together, let's imagine you come home from work, your apartment's a mess because you don't have a good self-maintenance practice and routine when you're getting ready and, doing all of your things when you leave for work. It's 6:30, you've done your workout, you come home, you don't have dinner prepped, and you also have no idea what you're going to be eating because you don't have the skill of cooking and planning. And on top of that, you're hungry, okay? So you're now actually hangry and your space is a disaster. What ends up happening is you are so discombobulated and out of whack that everything that you do in the evening feels significantly harder and more miserable, and now you're burnt out and like everything sucks and you want to die. And then what has to happen? The next day you have to get up and do it all over again. So having a process, I guess, for like learning how to not just maintain your life, but also regulate yourself when you step through the door at the end of the day is so important. And the self-regulation comes after those other administrative things are kind of all tied up and taken together. So I am someone who absolutely needs to have routine, or else I do get very dysregulated by the end of the day. So simple self-regulation skills include walking, breathing, having a consistent sleep schedule, eating regularly and making sure you have things prepared, reducing constant input with doom scrolling, podcasts, listening to stuff, whatever. When your nervous system is calmer, everything feels easier. So for example, let's say, you walk in the door at 6:30 after a workout and you're hungry, but you've done your deep breathing and you have a meal or a meal idea prepped in the refrigerator, and you know that all you need to do is put everything on the stove, in the oven, whatever, take a shower, and then you can sit down and have a meal and like take the edge off. Totally different evening experience. And let's say maybe in that morning you didn't have the time to pick up. You're in a more regulated state at this point, so it's a lot easier and less overwhelming. In an ideal world, you would have picked up your stuff in the morning before you leave. But just in case, we're not all perfect, it can't happen every day, having a regulated practice and a toolkit to bring, again, the temperature down. I've learned this in therapy, so incredibly important. Self-regulation is not an optional skill, it's a foundational skill. As I've mentioned, I do have an episode on how I am working on self-regulation from, I believe, last week. So you can go check that out if you haven't listened to it yet. Anyways, all of this to say, being an adult is a lot easier when life isn't so loud. It's not about having everything figured out 100% of the time, although that would be fabulous. If somebody has done that, please let me know what you've done. It's really all about building systems that support you when things get messy or busy or overwhelming, so that you are reducing decision fatigue. The goal is to eliminate or reduce friction in your day-to-day so your life starts to flow a little bit easier. So when you schedule things, instead of carrying them in your head, you have more mental room to actually be a good person or explore hobbies and interests or have time in your day to do things that you want to do. When you maintain your space in your body instead of ignore it, your life will get easier, your space will feel freer, you'll feel less mentally cluttered. When you handle your administrative stuff, your life admin, your appointments, your emails, your organization, your life will feel clearer and freer. When you can feed yourself consistently, you will feel significantly better and more steady. And when you learn how to regulate your nervous system, you'll find that you're much calmer and more at peace. These are not personality traits. They're skills, and they can all be learned. If you are someone who naturally isn't super organized, or maybe you're pretty type B, you can learn how to become a more organized person. If you are someone who is hyper type A and as a result you're constantly high strung, you can learn how to regulate your nervous system and bring the noise down. These are things that you can learn how to do. So I hope that this episode resonated with you. I want you to pick one category that I mentioned today and think about how this week you're going to make improvements to it so that going into next week you can start feeling a little bit more put together, we'll call it. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know. If you have a life admin skill or hack or practice that has changed your life or made your life significantly easier, please let me know. I would love to hear from you, either in the YouTube comments or in the comments on Spotify. And with that, thank you so much for listening. I hope you like the new little mini, we're going to call it a mini rebrand. And I will see you in the next one.